Okay, now this is working. Now, if you make me a co-host, everything will work.
All right, you're a co-host. Thank you, Greg.
Super.
And you got the PowerPoint.
And I've got the PowerPoint.
All right. It's 2 minutes fast.
Yeah, you just have to watch her for George Stone. He was having problems yesterday and he wanted to test.
Oh, that's good that he wanted to test it.
Yep.
Hey, George, welcome back.
Thank you.
Hope you had a good time.
It was a hell of a wedding. I'll just leave it there.
That's great. Sounds like you had a good time then.
So these don't show.
You don't? Well, I thought they might.
Well, bring them to the board a little bit here. Then I'll knock it over.
Yeah, you could.
Hey, Julie,
Hey, Jan.
good to see you back.
Thanks. We've been having high drama for the last 2 hours with George's computer. He's been on
No.
He's been on the assistance with Apple, and it still isn't working right. So
What's it doing or not doing?
he was having trouble using. He's got a double screen, and he wanted to use one for the PowerPoint, and he couldn't get both the screens to operate properly.
We can see you, okay?
No, now it's working with the one screen. And then we couldn't get I couldn't get onto it. It kept saying that there was already another meeting in progress. And it wouldn't stop showing that. Therefore.
Well, it should work now if you want to log in with your screen or with your computer.
That's okay. We wanted to use the same computer to do this program anyway.
Okay.
That way I can tell her she doesn't know what she's talking about.
Yeah. Or I can tell him to cool it. Be quiet.
So you're gonna be
When we do it in person, we talk over each other.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jim's enjoying the great outdoors tonight.
Yeah, you got the right idea.
Oh God, that looks so nice. Is that your backyard?
You got to unmute. Oh, there you go.
Oh,
I'm in the front yard.
that's your front
Nice.
yard? Wow. You must have a lot of property.
About an acre and a quarter, acre and a third.
Beautiful.
I think it's a bit warm, but other than that.
I'm downstairs in the basement most of the day. It's cool there.
Yeah,
Oh,
who has their air conditioning is working already? I mean, we don't.
Too early to turn on the central air.
I probably turn on my air conditioning twice a summer for about an hour or two each. Because when we live close to the lake, it doesn't get that hot. And I have a brick house, and if I keep it closed up, it keeps cool. So,
Well, you guys must be used to the heat after being out in the Southwest there.
it was warm in Tucson, but it wasn't oppressively hot. It was just nice, 80, 85. It was nice. Yeah.
Well, To me, that's hot, but not oppressively.
but not there. It's not too bad in Tucson.
That's because they got no humidity.
Right.
Yeah.
But it can still get pretty hot. I mean, if it's 115 degrees, it is hot. If there's humidity or not, it's just plain hot.
Wow. Is that how hot it was there?
Oh, no, it can get that hot though.
Oh, yeah. The
Easily.
desert, sure.
Yeah, in fact, a couple weeks ago in Phoenix, it was 115. Already, I have a friend who lives
Oh
there.
my gosh,
Mhm.
that wouldn't do for me.
So they moved from an air-conditioned house to an air-conditioned car to an air-conditioned store, an air-conditioned church,
Hmm.
And with swimming pools all over the place.
Yeah, that's Phoenix.
Golf courses and swimming pools.
Yeah, I'll stay here, thanks.
Oh, now I got to pull in closer to you, so we're both on the screen.
None of that on camera.
And push him off the chair.
And at 8:30,
What happens then?
we're out of here to catch jazz.
Yeah,
Oh, it's jazz night.
at the Uptowner.
Where are you going?
Uptowner Bar in River West has jazz on Tuesday nights. Some friends of ours play there on Tuesday nights.
And a good friend of ours who's pretty much a world-renowned trumpeter.
Wow. You guys know
Yeah.
a lot of great musicians.
We're really lucky. Yeah, we have a lot of musician friends. It's fun.
So when Julie had her heart procedure, her heart surgery, about a week later, Robin Fleur and
Chris Hansen.
Chris Hansen came over and sang songs to her that had the word heart in it for over an hour.
Oh, wow.
Over an
that's
hour.
cool.
They came up with all these songs.
Oh, lucky you. Well, that's neat.
So
At least they can really sing too. I mean, it's not like somebody coming over and just,
right,
not just anybody singing.
right.
Hey, you're looking good, Michael. In the bank?
Is that Michael Kumba? Oh, he's on mute. You're on
Right
mute.
there.
Yes,
Oh, yeah, thanks.
There
Hi.
you go. Okay. How was your trip to Europe, Mike?
It was very nice. I liked Amsterdam a lot. I went to The Hague too.
Ah,
Michael, I've only been to Amsterdam 5 times.
Oh, I'm
I
jealous.
love Amsterdam.
Yeah.
mm,
It used to be that if you connected with another flight in Amsterdam and it was less than 24 hours, you got a free day, a free night. So when I would go to like the Middle East or to Africa or to Europe, I'd always go to Amsterdam and get one night free on the way and come back through Amsterdam and get another night free. It was always hard to manipulate, but it was worth it.
Is that KLM, American Airlines?
KLM is great, but anybody who went through there.
Hmm.
Yeah. Here's George.
Steve Rogers, Tom Hillebrand, George Stone, Kevin.
You guys have to turn on your videos so we can see.
Okay, I was about to call George, but looks like he's in. Okay.
I'm here.
You're black and white. Oh,
There
there
it
you go.
is.
Okay.
Oh, I like your hat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very classy. Very classy.
I take it off with a belated Mother's Day wish.
Ah, thank
Oh, very nice.
you.
We have to have a meeting where we all wear hats.
Yeah, sure, we could do that. How about the next one? We should have done it for the Kentucky Derby, right?
Right.
It's funny, the fashion of men's hats. You know, you look at an old photograph, and if it's taken back in the 1940s or before, in any public place, almost all the men are wearing hats.
Right.
And then by the time you get to the 50s and 60s, that's not true anymore. And it's kind of like neckties now.
Yeah. And you know what changed things, George? What changed things was the movement from public transportation and buses and trains that allowed it to cars where it's difficult with a hat.
That's good. Greg has classier hats than that, but he chose that one.
That's fun.
There we go.
Okay. Hey, Bruce Wiggins, hello.
Hello, in our new place.
In your new house, yes, your new apartment.
We can tell by the boxes.
Yep, they're all over. Yeah, Terry's office, I don't know if she'll turn on her
Oh, there you
camera.
are. Hi, Jerry.
There she is.
Her office is pretty well set, not mine.
Yeah, she's got picture frames.
Yeah,
Yeah, her part of the room is put together.
So, story time.
Well,
We're 2 minutes later.
we usually start at 5 after.
Okay.
Are we expecting anybody else?
I'm expecting, I don't know, hoping, I guess, as usual.
We never know, right?
It's 3 minutes after. I give them, here's
Here's Joe.
a new one.
So,
Guess we
Joe from Kenosha.
oh,
Hey, Greg, thanks for your help. Whatever we did, it worked.
I didn't do anything.
That was the best thing to do.
Yeah.
He
Because
left
it's
it
just my
alone.
presence, huh? That's what Jan always tells me. Don't do anything. It's the best.
Okay, well, so I should say thanks for nothing.
That's right.
Well, it depends
Literally.
what you're talking about.
Well, we've had our pregnant pause here. Should we start this meeting and rock and roll here?
yeah,
What do you say, Greg?
Yep.
Okay.
You want me to
okay.
take it?
So, welcome everybody. There's a couple of people that don't have their faces up, and I'm not sure if we've seen you here before or not. Tom Hillebrand, have you been with us before in these meetings? I think so.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good to have you. And Joe Dubanovich.
Joe's been with us.
Yeah. Hi, Joe. You're on mute.
Couple of times, yes.
Okay, good. Good to see you. Then there's a Jess Devitt. Hi, Jess. Welcome. And Bill from Madison is with us. Hi, Bill. What's your last name?
Backus.
Backup.
I'm the treasurer of 350 Wisconsin.
Oh,
I've been
good.
meaning to get on one of these meetings, but I have so many other meetings, I just haven't been able to until
Okay.
tonight.
Oh, welcome. Good to have
I
you.
actually skipped 3 other meetings to be on this one.
Oh, that puts us on the spot.
We feel privileged. Privileged, Bill. Thank you.
I'm not that important.
Okay. Well, in the last, since we met the last time, there was the Earth Day event that we had at City Hall. And I thought perhaps a couple of the people who were involved in that or present would like to give a little feedback on how that went. I was out of town. George and I were out of town on vacation. So although we helped to organize it, we weren't able to be there. But we heard it rained a lot that day.
We were at a hell of a wedding.
That's okay. And so Jim Schultz, and Greg and Jan, and, you know, maybe if there's anybody else that would like to comment on, Terry, we can comment on how that went that day, considering.
Well, I can start. I was sitting in the front row, so I couldn't survey the room to see exactly how many people were there, but I know we set out 40 chairs initially, and then they kept bringing more out. So there must have been at least 50 people, I would say. And we had a really nice program. And I think we should give a shout out to people that took part, to the MCs. I don't know if Chris Meyer is with us tonight. She was really good. And Pam and Matilda and Jim for bringing all the equipment. And musicians were wonderful. And David Drake, that played It's a Wonderful World, said that he was doing it per request of Julie Enslow. So Julie, you got to mention. And we heard from some students, which was great. Matilda from UWM and Anathea from Marquette gave their perspectives about climate change and how it affected them personally and what actions we should take. So it was good that they added their voices. And we got the Native American blessing from Mark Denning, is it Denning?
Yes.
Mhm.
And Nick Kovac talked to us, which by the way, it said in today's paper, he is now the city's budget director. He's going to be the city budget director.
Good.
Mhm.
And then Tom Siri talked to us about Chase Bank and the finance industry. So we had a lot of information. We handed out a lot of brochures, and we waited till the very last minute to decide if we were going to march. But alas, the rain did not cooperate, which is too bad because Pat brought all African drums and stuff. I thought, well, that would have been neat.
Uh-huh.
Didn't work out. So, but it was good.
Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you. That was a good review.
Yeah.
Anything to add? Jim Schultz, anything to add? Or?
I think we might have had about 80, possibly 90 people there for a while because we had some people that were coming there for business but stopped to see what was going on and watched for a while and then went on with their business.
Great.
A lot of the folks from the offices came out for a while, even if they didn't come downstairs, they were out upstairs. And a lot of the folks that were downstairs came out of the office too to watch and listen. I think it was a pretty good turnout, a lot of interest. Nobody went running when the thing was over. Everybody stayed and kind of talked for quite a while and made connections and stuff. I think it went pretty well.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Terry, yes.
Yeah, I thought one of the most interesting things of the day was that Mark Denning arrived just as he was being introduced. And he told us that the reason that he was just arriving is that he had been at the Native American school, I think it was, and the governor had announced that he was opening an office for nature, is what he said. But it was the governor announced the formation of the Environmental Justice Office.
Good.
For the state, and that accomplishment to have that.
Excellent. Okay. Anything else? I guess.
Here's Tom Siri.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, guys.
Yeah.
We're just doing a review of the Earth Day event.
All right.
Sounds like thank you for all your work. It sounds like it went well. Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry we couldn't be there too.
Yeah.
And I just want to briefly say that over the last 20 years, that we have never been denied the use of City Hall. We've had up to 3,000 people in there during the Iraq War, in that vestibule and up the balconies. But they have always cooperated, set up sound systems, been on time. It's a freebie. And I like the fact that City Hall should be the seat of our democracy. And I just encourage other groups to use it as much as possible. Thank you.
Okay. I especially like the idea of the people who worked in the building coming through over the noon hour and joining our event. Thanks, Jim Schultz, for mentioning that. That's really, really helpful that they got the message too. So it's very good. Right. Okay. Now, just one other thing before we get into tonight's content. Friday, again, we'll be at the Chase Bank in Whitefish Bay and Silver Spring and Lydell at 12 noon. And Michael Kumba has an idea for an action at Chase Bank. And Michael, why don't you take it? Are you there?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stop the Money Pipeline has a week of action. It's Monday the 16th through Friday the 20th. They're calling it an art action week. They're sending me 12 posters. They're like big posters. There's 3.5 feet by 5.5 feet. I don't know when I'm going to get them, but yeah, I was just wondering if anybody was interested. They want them put up either near a Chase Bank or maybe even on a Chase Bank or on a Chubb branch. And Chubb is like a big investor of fossil fuels, including like the Trans Mountain Pipeline and the DAPL and a bunch of other things like the Arctic Refuge. They're insuring that. So if anybody's interested in receiving any posters, I feel like it's a lot for me to put up. I'll put my email through the group, and if anybody wants one or two to come pick them up once I get them, just email me and I'll let you know when I get them. I'm just going to tape them up probably like near the door of a Chase's or something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
And thank you. And that fits into what we discussed last month. We discussed having a strategic planning session this month around the urgency of the issue and possible direct action, but that we decide where we're going to go and what we're going to do. And I think it's important that we schedule that and not delay it. I'm just putting that out there, and I'm just saying, if we don't do this, it's boo on us. We're not being true to ourselves. Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah. I think the June could be the U.S. Supreme Court has got a case called West Virginia versus the EPA. That case, if the Supreme Court does what they did in the Roe case, will end up cutting the power of the EPA to control carbon dioxide. A major course that's going to happen there, and we've got to be ready for that. Just like this latest event, I don't know whether the court's going to do it. I listened to these about 3/4 of the question, this open session of the court on this, and the conservatives were not talking at all. It was only the liberals who were asking questions and getting ideas and are trying to develop ideas. So I'm perhaps not being optimistic about this, but I'm afraid that is well going to happen, and we need to be ready for that. Because it would be a disaster if EPA could not say you can't put out carbon dioxide. So that's the issue that's going to be developing in June, probably late in June, maybe into July, by the time the court comes up with it. So for what it's worth.
I had heard a similar report, and this whole issue is really about states' rights versus federal regulations, and this is pretty darn serious when it comes to the climate issue, to all these issues, that there cannot be any universal policy in the country, and we really need to be on top of that. So Tom, can we assign you to be the main person to keep tabs on that and see how, what we want to do about that? I assume it would be a demonstration downtown, and maybe going to the Central Building, to the, I don't know, City Hall again. We'd have to have a committee that would decide the actual actions, but we need to be out there. As far as having a specific plan, a date for strategic planning session, could we put that onto the steering committee and then open that up to anybody, everybody in the, not just steering committee, but everybody who would like to be participating in that. And just get the word out once the date's established by the steering committee. Does that make sense? Does it?
The steering committee meeting is a week from today. You want to make
Okay.
those decisions then, or do you, I think
Yeah.
it might be a little bit,
We can make the decision then for the date, and that we'd have the strategic planning session.
I second that.
Is that okay? Okay.
And what time is that on next Tuesday? 1 o'clock?
1 o'clock.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll be sending out an email notification
All right.
the day before on Monday.
Thank you.
Is there any other item that needs to be brought up before we get into the program?
I'm not seeing any hands coming up, so why don't we, we'll start off here. I think we've all are aware of, and second here. That's interesting. Tom got knocked out. We're probably all aware of what's happening around the world this spring. What we've been seeing over the last many years, actually 5, 10 and more years, is escalating impact of climate change and the heat that's being recorded this spring in the Far East and in India is unexpected and high even for those climates. So to talk about some of the causes of the climate change, some of the factors in it. We have 2 speakers tonight who are well known to most of us on this. Julie Enslow, who has worked on peace, nuclear disarmament, and environmental issues since the Vietnam War. Whoa, George.
Sorry.
Okay. She was a co-founder in 1977 of Mobilization for Survival. That has since become Peace Action of Wisconsin. She's also served as its program organizer, newsletter editor, and steering committee member. For the past 8 years, she's, well, actually she was part of initiating 350 Milwaukee. And during those 8 years, she's done a lot of work with 350 Milwaukee, and as well as the other international climate action groups that's affiliated with us, which is 350.org. And our second speaker is George Martin. He had initially a career in marketing and healthcare for the homeless. He joined Peace Action of Wisconsin as a program director in 2001. He's also served as co-chair of National United for Peace and Justice, and he did that for about 8 years during the Iraq War. Currently works with 350 Milwaukee, serves on the Milwaukee County and City Task Force on climate crisis and economic equity. So let's welcome Julie and George.
Okay. Thank you. Would you like to set up the PowerPoint, Greg? Okay, so tonight we're going to be taking a look at the connections between militarism and climate change. And we've presented this workshop for the last few years at World Social Forums around the world and different conferences here in the States. And it's all of a sudden it's starting to become a more common theme now that people are recognizing there is this big link between militarism and climate change. So we're going to go into this issue.
And we started this 8-9 years ago at a national and worldwide level.
Yeah.
And so, you know, this has kind of been central to our work over the years.
How do we change?
What's that?
How do we move this forward?
Well,
Can you do it?
Greg, can we move the slides? I'm not seeing how.
He's on, Greg's on mute.
You're on mute, Greg. Still on mute, Greg.
Okay, let's go back. Just let me know when you want to advance it. The answer to your question is no, we can't do that.
Okay. So,
All right, let's go to the next one.
these go pretty fast. You start out.
All right, so global priorities. War versus climate. Two important reports were released in April of this year, neither getting the kind of attention they deserve. On April 4, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's Working Group 3 report was published, evoking a strong reaction from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Next.
Next.
Back one.
Well, that's it.
The report, the UN Secretary General said, is a litany of broken climate promises. It is a file of shame, cataloging the empty pledges that put us firmly on track toward an unlivable world. At COP26 in November 21, the developed countries pledged to spend a modest $100 billion for the Adaptation Fund to assist developing countries to adapt to climate change. Next. Then in April 22, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute issued its annual report finding that the world military spending surpassed $2 trillion in 21. The first time is that it has exceeded the $2 trillion mark. The 5 largest spenders, the US, China, India, the United Kingdom, and Russia, account for 62% of this amount. The United States by itself accounts for 42% of total arms expenditures. Next. There is an endless flow of money for weapons, but less than a pittance to avert planetary disaster. That's from Vijay Prasad, Tricontinental Institute of Social Research. Vijay Prasad is the leading in this country in this effort. Human-induced climate change and the war on Ukraine have the same roots, fossil fuels and our dependence on them. That's from Svetlana Krakowska, Ukraine's leading climate scientist. Next. Putin's war in Ukraine is being fueled by the world's addiction to oil, Fortune magazine. Next.
So some people say that Russia is a gas station with its own army, which is kind of a clever little saying, but it's kind of scary too, because it's not the only country that's a gas station with an army. Next. The quicker that the green transition happens, the less dependence there will be on fossil fuels. And by definition, the less dependence on Russian gas. And that's from Richard Morningstar of the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center. Next. What we are experiencing today in Russia is that Russia is using its natural gas resources as an economic and political weapon. And the answer is not more U.S. domestic production, but to dramatically reduce the United States dependence on fossil fuels. We can fight authoritarianism and climate change at the same time by making massive investments in clean, renewable energy. Next. So the Ukrainians are losing their lives in this dreadful war. And at the same time, the US fossil fuel industry and their backers in Congress are exploiting this crisis, locking in decades of fossil fuel dependence and enormous profits. Consumers are paying the price at the gas pump and with destructive climate change in our future.
Next.
A particularly dangerous example is the support for expanded U.S. gas export facilities in this country, which would raise domestic energy prices, burden vulnerable Gulf Coast communities with increased pollution from the facilities, and put the U.S. and global climate targets permanently out of reach.
Next. Huge oil profits. ExxonMobil, Shell, Chevron, and British Petroleum combined made $71 billion in profits last year. $71 billion last year. Now they stand to make even more profits as Russia's invasion of the Ukraine sends oil prices higher still. And they're exploiting the Ukraine crisis to lobby for more drilling, even though that will do nothing to lower prices now or anytime soon.
Next. Next.
Oil profits so far this year. The oil giants have announced their profits for the first 3 months of 22. 3 months, Exxon made $5.5 billion. BP made $6.2 billion. Chevron made $6.3 billion. Shell made $9.1 billion, its best quarter ever. That puts these 4 dirty energy companies on pace for $108.4 billion in combined profits this year, on top of their $71 billion in combined profits last year. We're talking about profits. It's not like they're using that windfall to invest in renewables. Instead, they're using it to buy back their own stock. Next. Making fortunes off of war. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has criticized how fossil fuel companies are responding to the war in the Ukraine. He wrote, "Fossil fuel interests are now cynically using the war in Ukraine to try to lock in a high carbon future. A shift to renewables is crucial to mending our broken global energy mix and offering hope to millions suffering climate impacts today."
Next.
All this while the world is facing an existential crisis of global warming and climate change caused by the burning of fossil fuels since the beginning of the industrial age. All of our collective energy should be focusing on transition to sustainable, renewable energy, restorative agriculture, reforestation, and less consumption of resources. Time is running out.
Next. So there is this vicious cycle of militarism contributing to climate change and climate change contributing to more militarism. Next. The US military is the single largest institutional consumer of energy in the entire world. And it's the biggest purchaser of petroleum products. Next. It's also the world's single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. US military carbon emissions exceed that of over 140 nations. And the military measures gallons per mile and gallons per minute or barrels per hour.
Next. Next.
The U.S. Air Force is the biggest military consumer of fuel. The Air Force uses half the oil consumed by the Department of Defense. In 2006, the U.S. Air Force consumed as much fuel as all U.S. planes did during all of World War II.
Next.
The U.S. Air Force F-16 Fighting Falcons consume 800 gallons per hour.
Next.
F-15 fighter jets burns 1,580 gallons per hour, or as much as 4 gallons per second.
Next.
B-52 Stratocruiser consumes 86 barrels of fuel per hour.
Next.
The U.S. Army Abrams tank burns 250 gallons of fuel per hour.
Next.
And the 2022 military appropriations for the defense budget plans to provide $8.7 billion for 85 new F-35 aircrafts. There's, again, fighter jets. Each F-35 burns 22 gallons of jet fuel per minute and emits between 100 million and 200 million pounds of CO2 per year. And a number of these F-35s are planned to be stationed in Madison at Truex Field. The U.S. Empire, 800 official U.S. military bases around the world, plus hundreds of other military installations and shared use of other countries' bases. Why?
Conquest and world domination strategy. That's why. Conquest and world domination strategy. Control of resources. Protect U.S. corporate economic interests.
Next.
The U.S. empire. Major elements. 1. Control of the world economy and its financial markets. 2. Takeover of all natural resources. This constitutes the cornerstone of U.S. power through the activities of its multinational corporations.
Next.
Planet Earth is a U.S. military base.
Okay.
Total spectrum dominance. U.S. military control of land, the Army, oceans, the Navy, air, the Air Force, space, now the Space Force.
Next.
The U.S. worldview. The U.S. tends to view the Earth's surface as a vast territory to conquer, occupy, and exploit. That is the view it was founded upon. The U.S. military splits the world up into geographic command units, vividly illustrating the underlying geopolitical reality. Next. World command centers for the U.S. And you can see that we have divided up this world between the U.S. Pacific Command, U.S. North Command, U.S. South Command in terms of South America, U.S. AFRICOM. No African company would host the command. It's run out of Germany. U.S. European Command, U.S. Central Command, U.S. Pacific Command. Again, with this idea, founded on the notion of world dominance. Next. U.S. military bases are used for political intimidation, the control of strategic resources, and the protection of corporate interests. And Julie gets on me about this, but I throw it in. You know, the fact that the U.S. Marines took over the sovereign nation of Hawaii for the Dole Corporation to own land. Protection of corporate interests. U.S. military bases in other countries are mainly located in Western Europe, Japan, the Persian Gulf, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and increasingly in Southeast Asia and Africa.
Next.
U.S. military pivot to Africa. Next.
Um,
US,
Well, if you back up just a minute to the last one, the blue dots on there are the actual military bases that we have in Africa. Remember, we have over 800 in the world. Okay, and the other colored dots are where we have shared facilities or intelligence communication facilities or centers.
or we have equipment supplies, our armament, you know, in terms of centrally so that we can get to them and not have to ship them to Africa.
Okay, next. In recent years, there's been a U.S. pivot to Asia, actually under the Obama administration. It began to ring China with U.S. and allied forces. By 2020, 60% of U.S. naval capacity was based in the Asia Pacific, where 320,000 U.S. troops are already stationed. Thailand, India, Singapore, Australia, Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Japan, Okinawa, South Korea, and Guam. Next. One of the main tenets of our strategy is to expand engagement and interoperability and integration with our friends and partners militaries in that part of the world, according to General Herbert Carlisle, which really means that we expect these other countries to purchase military equipment basically from us that will be interoperable and be able to be integrated with our military equipment and operations. And that's very much the same thing as what we've been doing with NATO. Any new NATO country is required to buy military equipment that's interoperable with the United States and NATO equipment. Next. The U.S. military bases that are threatening China, you can see circle about 2/3 of China, and actually next. China itself has only one base in the Asia Pacific outside of their own borders, and that's in Djibouti. They also have built 3 man-made islands in the East China Sea off to on your screen, everybody off to the right. And those man-made islands that they've built in supposedly their ocean territory are being used for military bases now. So that totals 4 compared to what we have in the region.
Next.
And then there's these joint military exercises that we hold around the world, around China, which is a mix of the Air Force and the Navy and the Army doing these military games, actually, military exercises. And they are threatening for countries where we're right on their borders doing these exercises.
For example, North Korea on the border with South Korea, military exercises that are controlled and commanded by the U.S. On the Russian border, you know, military exercises that are controlled and commanded by the U.S.
And then all those NATO countries that are near the border of Russia, and including Ukraine, which isn't a NATO country, but we've also had military exercises in Ukraine over the past few years, right along the near the Russian border. So they're used as a threat, and they also use up an incredible amount of fuel and give off a lot of CO2 emissions during these exercises.
And in places that may not be significant, such as the Philippines, 25,000 U.S. troops exercising with 20,000 Filipino troops under the U.S. command.
Next.
War games.
So these joint exercises serve as an intimidation and threat to enemy countries in the region. As we say, China and Russia are prime targets. And the U.S. commands and coordinates the other countries' militaries in these exercises. And the joint exercises tend to raise existing tensions in the region, such as George mentioned in North Korea and in Russia. And they contribute to fossil fuel use and greenhouse gas. Okay, next.
Oil wars. The U.S. fights wars for oil to have oil to fight wars. As we said in Iraq, what's our oil doing under their sand? Next. Oil wars. World War I, Churchill converted the British Navy to oil-burning engines to give them an advantage. World War II, Germany fought to secure oil fields for the war effort. Japan fought to control ocean oil lanes for its war effort.
Next.
Next.
Well, this is you.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're on it, Greg. Oil wars, the Middle East. Conflicts based on control of oil. Iraq was all about oil. Afghanistan was wanted for oil and gas pipelines. Syria was also targeted for oil and gas pipelines. Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline is a threat to the U.S. fracked natural gas sales to Europe.
Next.
Sanctions on Russia. The current economic sanctions on Russia since the invasion of the Ukraine have cut their oil and gas sales in half. It's another form of an oil war. U.S. oil and gas corporations are scrambling to fill the gap in liquefied natural gas. Sales to European countries have with more expensive fracked natural gas.
Next.
Oil is indispensable for war today. At the onset of the Iraq War in March 2003, the U.S. Army estimated it would need more than 40 million gallons of gasoline for 3 weeks of combat. By one calculation, the U.S. military consumes as much as 1 million barrels of oil per day and contributes 5% of current global warming emissions. Add to that all the other militaries in the world.
Next.
Special treatment. Check this out. The U.S. Congress has exempted the U.S. military and Border Patrol from U.S. environmental laws, endangered species laws, and UN greenhouse gas agreements.
Next. Actually, the Kyoto Protocols back in 1997 set binding targets for 37 industrialized countries and the European community for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I just found out the other day, I read this in an historical account, the U.S. refused to sign that agreement unless the military was exempt from those protocol agreements, those Kyoto Protocol agreements. And so evidently the militaries all over the world are exempt from greenhouse gas emission agreements. Next. Now, the Pentagon actually understands climate change. They're not climate deniers. The Pentagon recognizes that climate change is a threat multiplier and that it will result in mass migrations and far more wars and more conflicts threatening U.S. national security. Next. The Pentagon plans are being made to protect U.S. economic interests around the world that will be threatened by the climate crisis. Next. The Pentagon actually gave some very specific warnings to two of the U.S. presidents, saying that the climate crisis is a security issue. In 2003, the CIA and the Pentagon reported to President Bush that in the coming 2 decades, the biggest threat to security, peace, and stability will come from impacts of climate change. Bush buried the report. In 2014, the Pentagon published another report to President Obama on the threat to national security from climate change called the Climate Change Adaptation Roadmap. Obama did not bury that report. He took it more seriously, at least. And then President Trump comes along and totally dismisses the Pentagon's warnings.
Next.
Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel has been a pretty strong voice around climate issues. And he gave a strong speech back in 2014 in Peru at an international conference of military leaders from over 30 countries, warning of security threats from climate change. Next. He said, loss of glaciers will strain water supplies in several areas of our hemisphere. Destruction and devastation from hurricanes can sow the seeds for instability. Droughts and crop failures can leave millions of people without any lifeline and trigger waves of mass migration.
Next.
In the Caribbean, the sea level rise may claim 1,200 square miles of coastal land in the next 50 years, and some islands may have to be completely evacuated.
Next.
According to some estimates, rising temperatures could melt entire glaciers in the Andes, which could have cascading economic and security consequences. Next. Our coastal, now he takes it to our own military self-interest. He says our coastal installations could be vulnerable to rising shorelines and flooding, and extreme weather could impair our training ranges, supply chains, and critical equipment. Our military's readiness could be tested and our capabilities could be stressed. So this will come home to get us too.
Next. Climate crisis is real and now. Next. 350, the most important number in the world. We know this. Leading climate scientists agree that 350 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere is the top limit for life to survive as we know it on this planet.
Next.
Climate tipping point. CO2 has hit 421.89 parts per million.
That was yesterday's measurement. I just got that off the computer yesterday.
Next. We're here. We need to get below 350. Next. We can see the average temperatures in the 5-year rise. Next. The last 5 years have been the hottest in the history of Earth. Next. Who's responsible? Only a handful of oil, gas, coal, and cement companies, about 90, are responsible for 2/3 of greenhouse gas emissions. Cement, keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Their interests and access to resources and markets are protected by the U.S. military and its allies.
Next.
U.S. is responsible for 1/3 of global emissions, 1/3 of global emissions. Trump pulled out of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. Biden bought us back in, said the right things, but his actions have not matched his words.
Next.
Realities of climate change. Heat waves, wildfires, droughts, glaciers disappearing, polar caps melting. Next.
Oceans are rising, threatening island nations and coastal lowlands, floods, superstorms. 70% of the world's population lives in coastal areas. Next, well, droughts. We know what that looks like. Next. The potential for conflicts, even in just the area of water alone. Who has a priority for water? Thirsty cities or food producers? Subsistence farmers or export agribusiness? Poor rural communities or revenue generating mines? Agriculture or hydroelectricity? Next. The recent IPCC report published on February 28th of this year states that droughts induced by higher levels of global warming by increasing vulnerability will increasingly affect violent intrastate conflict.
Next.
And then, of course, the melting Arctic. Next. So in this photograph, the white area is the ice that remains. The dark area is the open water, and the dark ocean surface reflects only 6% of incoming solar radiation, whereas the sea ice reflects 50 to 70%. So the more ice that melts, the warmer the water becomes because it absorbs more and more heat, and it becomes almost like a vicious circle. It keeps melting more and more of the ice, and we see that happening right now. Next. So as the Arctic melts, Arctic Ocean melts, it's opening up new possibilities for shipping lanes, for one thing, the blue line showing how the shipping lane can go up and over through the Arctic Ocean and around. Next. And with the open seas come new coastlines for the US, Canada, Russia, Norway, Iceland, and Greenland, which gives them new borders to defend and new military bases and militarization of the region, which Canada, Russia, and the United States have been doing for the last few years already. Next. New sea lanes, commercialization, and shipping will be happening, and drilling for oil and gas in the ocean will result in some conflicts over drilling rights in the ocean.
Next. Climate crisis, climate chaos. Next. Climate change chaos, water wars, lack of arable land, lack of potable water, mass migrations and border conflicts, food shortage, famine, tropical diseases moving north.
Next.
Climate crisis disproportionately impacts the poor. Superstorms in the Philippines, Haiti, Australia, the US, Louisiana, Puerto Rico, Mozambique, bordering countries in Africa, floods, Bangladesh, drought, Africa, Brazil, Central America, US, rising oceans, coastlines, low-lying areas, island nations.
Next.
Environmental crisis and conflicts. Middle East oil wars. Syria. 10-year drought led to the conflict. Palestine, Israel, water. Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, the Horn of Africa. Darfur, Sudan. I got to digress here. You know, I was in Baghdad 4 days after shock and awe. And I met 3,000 Sudanese who had migrated from Sudan and Africa up to Baghdad because of the drought and the economic situation. African land grabs, deforestation. I got to digress here when I talk about land grabs. You know, I was in Kenya with hundreds of African people marching because they were driven off of their land by their own governments in terms of this crisis and wanting that land and to deforest it and make profit off of it. Deforestation in South America and Southeast Asia, hugely. Next. Bangladesh.
So Bangladesh is a real interesting situation. As you can tell, there's these major rivers that run through, and there's all these.
It's a lowland.
It's a very low land, and it's subject to floods, and it's subject to, they don't call them hurricanes, cyclones coming in from the ocean. And India, as the climate changes, they expect more and more flooding and more people having to leave the country as climate refugees. India doesn't want all these Bangladesh people coming in as climate refugees.
India surrounding 3/4 of the land of Bangladesh.
There, and so India has been building this wall or this fence around the entire border of Bangladesh, and Myanmar down in the lower corner here has also been putting up a fence along its border with that lower part of Bangladesh. And it's militarized. It has guard towers periodically along it, and it's being a militarized border simply because of the climate crisis.
Next.
Well, that just tells what I already said.
Next.
So this military response to climate chaos comes at different levels. It comes from national militaries with wars over dwindling resources and control to limit or stop mass migrations across borders, not only there in Bangladesh, but the US-Mexican border. These are climate refugees in many cases that have been driven off their lands in Central America from extensive droughts and coming north to try to find a better way of life. And plus, at another level, there's police and paramilitaries and private security companies that are involved in responding to the climate crisis. Next.
Let me break in here, Julie, real quickly.
Yeah.
Julie and I have done presentations on the border of the U.S. and Mexico around climate, the climate refugees, and also around the School of the Americas, which is located in Georgia, and has trained more than 10,000 paramilitary in South America, who have been a huge part of this repression, and also the murders of activists. Next.
So there's a repression of environmental activists all around the world. And in many places, they label them environmental terrorists. In fact, that word has been flung around in this country about people like you as being environmental terrorists. Repression of indigenous peoples who are often killed or removed from their land while struggling to protect it and their water. Over 800 environmental activists were assassinated around the world last year in 2021.
And mainly in Africa and South America.
And so what are they doing? These paramilitaries and police forces and private security forces are in the business of protecting the wealthy and the powerful from the rest of us.
Next.
So we have reached a tipping point on climate action, and scientists say we have roughly 1 decade left to avoid the most catastrophic effects of climate change.
Next. Climate justice. The poor and those who contribute the least to greenhouse gas emissions are the first to be affected by the chaos of global warming. We must address the need for economic justice as we work for climate justice. Indigenous people around the world have taken a strong lead in working for climate justice and teaching us how to live in harmony with our Mother Earth.
Next.
Climate justice. People around the world are coming together in a united struggle to preserve a livable planet. Worldwide, peace organizations are beginning to connect militarism and the climate crisis. We need each other. In fact, we'll be doing a presentation to Peace Action Wisconsin in a few weeks on this subject of militarism and climate.
Next. This is a photograph of, must have been
New York.
How many? Like almost 750,000 people. It was a huge amount. And we sent busloads from Milwaukee to join this huge demonstration for the climate in New York City.
And then also just in terms of the legacy in the future, 350 Milwaukee, we had fundraisers. We raised money to bring youth from the Wisconsin Native American Council and from the Milwaukee NAACP. We brought them to this demonstration in New York. We organized over 100 workshops, and we participated. And this was the biggest, hugest thing that really kicked off our climate movement in the U.S. Next.
And that's basically it. that is the end of the PowerPoint. And we'd like to open it up for discussion, questions, comments. So Greg, if you want to shut down the slideshow.
Get this sorted. Okay, well, first of all, thank you both very much.
Jesus Christ, they deserve a round of applause.
Now everybody
Yeah,
take their,
bravo, come on.
Yeah, great.
hey,
So Greg, you might want to start with questions in the chat since they're already there. I don't know how many questions there.
let me take a look here. Talk to wrapping up. That's fine. If you're interested, Wisconsin for environment, probably for you. That's
Did you write anything, George?
No.
forward. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So
Jim Schultz had a comment there about Biden talk of ramping up production of our natural gas and of our, and you know, he has increased the amount of contracts or leases of federal land for fossil fuel use considerably. That was one thing years back that we did here at 350. There was going to be a national sale of, or a leasing of public lands for the fossil fuel countries to drill or for yeah, I think it was mainly drilling for oil and gas.
Yes.
And they moved those auctions. They moved them around from city to city, and they show us Milwaukee. And this must be about maybe seven, eight years ago now. And so we organized a big event here in Milwaukee to shut down that auction, and we really hardly anybody came to it when they found out that we were going to have such a huge demonstration against it. People came from Madison and
Illinois,
and all over, and so not many people showed up, and it was pretty much of a flop. And we went inside and took over the not the inside room, but the lobby of the area, and it was a lot of fun. It was very effective, and it definitely slowed down the process. And people, this has been happening over the years now, where people have been trying to shut down these federal auctions of public land. And of course, so all of this is subsidized. Really, so these fossil fuel companies can get access to our public lands for the fossil fuels for really very little money. Most of it is subsidized by our tax dollars. So.
And then that was one of our bigger student turnouts. We had students from Whitewater, from Oshkosh, from Milwaukee, from Madison, but that brought the students out, I'll tell you, because of that legacy of young people being able to stall these auctions.
we've got a question from Steve Waltrus.
Hi, I'm Steve Watrous. Thanks. Great presentation. I always learn something new from you guys. And it's been a long time since I came to a 350 event, so it's very impressive, all the things you're doing in Milwaukee. I wonder, you mentioned the COP26. There's another COP coming up near the end of this year. I wonder if you know if civil society groups are going to be doing things sort of outside the gates of the COP27 in Egypt, and if you think that's a good idea.
Do you know where that's going to be held?
In Sharm el Sheikh, it's Egypt.
Oh, Egypt, that's right.
Okay. George Stone, you have any info on that? Hey, George, you're on mute.
Still on mute. So I don't have an answer for you, Steve. I mean, but I'm sure they're going to have big demonstrations outside. There were tremendous numbers of people at Glasgow.
There's George.
Yeah. So George,
you know what's happening coming up?
Damn. I can't hear anything.
oh, we were talking about the
No sound.
next COP conference coming up this fall. And
What is
Egypt.
wrong with this? No, I don't
I
want
guess
to.
they can't hear it.
No, cancel.
So we'll skip the stones for the moment.
You're gonna skip Stone.
Yeah, we'll have to skip stones. So I'm sorry, I don't have any more information for you, Steve. Well, I'm sure it'll be public when it happens.
Where is the sound? I don't have the sound.
So, yeah,
Okay.
so Jan's on the stack,
Sorry,
I
everybody.
see.
Okay.
Let's hear it. Where is the sound? Can somebody help me? I'll put it in the chat. Where's the sound?
Can you?
Well, while you're doing that, Eileen, let's move on to Jan.
Jan, can you unmute yourself?
I'm trying to wrap my head around all this consumption of fuel per day, and it's just
A whole lot.
mind-boggling. But where is this all coming from? Are these US sources? Do people realize that Texas maybe or whatever is supplying this? Are these foreign? What do they do? Take some from each country? I don't get where all this is coming from.
No, that's a
Do you
good
understand my
question.
question?
But let me jump in here a little bit historically. Probably 2005, we had an intern from Germany. And we did the first research on the tar sands in Canada. And my work with the World Peace Council, it was brought up by the First Nation in Canada in terms of the destruction there. Okay? And the tar sands, that whole pipeline from Canada to the US was meant for military purposes completely. It was going to the mid states, and there was going to be refined for the military. But then the corporations decided they could make more money by refining it for the rest of the world and selling it, as opposed to keeping it in the US military. And so that whole process of it's a commercial process. It's what it is. You know, we forsake the discount of processing our own oil to process it for profit. I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Here we have a question from a phone in ending in 909. Could you identify yourself and ask your question, please?
And unmute. You're muted. Good.
Hey, this is Ron calling in from northern Wisconsin. And that notion of federal lands being available for mineral extraction is hitting us right now in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
A company called Green Light Metals has just applied for a drilling project to happen right in the middle of our Shawamakan-Nicolet National Forest. And they're from Canada, So again, maybe we should be watching the northern border, but they have a project planned for right in the middle of the Chewamegon Forest, and also just a little bit east of Wausau. And you can find out more at greenlightmetals.com. And they have extensive plans for the two regions. But I think the solution to save Wisconsin from mineral extraction activities is to have our public land withdrawn. And I'd like to hear if there's any success with the folks who are presenting today on that. And by the way, we had a sulfuric acid mining moratorium for about 20 years. It was called the Prove It First law. Well, that was overturned 5 years ago. Over in Minnesota, they are trying to do the two things that Wisconsin once had. They're trying to implement their own Prove It First law, and they're also trying to withdraw their Superior National Forest from extraction activities. Now, as far as I know, there's no effort going on to save Wisconsin from that type of fate. So I'll listen in. You've been doing a great job. I've learned a lot.
So let me interject. It's Ron, right?
Correct.
Yeah, Ron, we have a chat. If you could add that information to the chat, that chat is accessible to everybody in terms of a download, so they will have the information directly. But to answer Ron's question, what are we doing here in Wisconsin
Boy,
in terms of controlling the land?
does anybody know that? No, because of the laws, as you said, that prevented some of those big mines in the past. I think they ran out and they weren't renewed. And so we're once again, open to that kind of activity. And then the fact that these are Canadian corporations that do this. I heard that the greatest percentage of mining companies in the whole world come out of Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I call on our guy here from 350 Madison? Just shouting out to you. Are you aware of anything in terms of controlling the land? Hey, Bill.
Hi. No, I'm not, to be honest. Not saying nobody with us is, but I'm not.
Okay.
And this is Ron again from up north. I apologize. I'm joining by my cell phone, so I can't do that entering thing in the chat. All I can recommend is that you maybe write down greenlightmetals.com and see their project scope. They're currently pitching this to investors to go public. They want to develop the whole northern half of Wisconsin for sulfuric acid mining zone. So, I know the groups in Madison, it's a little bit far away, but we're really going to need some help up here. And I'll be happy to talk with 350.org folks, in another venue somehow later on. But this is happening.
Now, I'm going to throw this out there. And we're not that many tonight. We've been up to 60 at times. Is there anyone here on this call who wants to take this lead in terms of working with Ron and other folks on this control of land? Anybody here want to take lead on this?
I could offer some information. This is Steve. I've been to both of those sites. They were run by the Aquila company, which is doing the Back 40 mine, but they sold off the rights to this new one. And there's already been test drilling in the Chewamegon site. Chewamegon, to my surprise, actually has quite a bit of private land within it. I don't know if the key spot is private or public at this point. That one's called the Bend because of a bend in the river right near it. The other one near the Dells of the Eau Claire, which is not near Eau Claire at all, but just the one near Wausau, is called the Reef because, well, Wisconsin used to be underwater. And that's just sort of a wide open area that has farms and houses on it and some wildlife. I don't know who has the rights to above or below ground level on those. Dave Bluen in Madison at the Sierra Club is a key person working on those issues.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So I want to refer this to our steering committee's next meeting to take up this issue.
Mhm.
I think it's really important that it's on the agenda. Again, thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hey, Tom Siri.
Yeah. There's too much going on, but I'm with Tim Corden on, he's got a building unity group that has a bit more range to it. But it sounds like we need to get Zooms with all these guys. I think it was Don up in the North Country. You know, we in Milwaukee got to get in contact with you in the North and find ways of getting these meetings together so that we're all working together to really try to do something. Yeah, we got his phone number there. So I'm sorry, was it Ron or Don?
Ron.
Don.
It's Ron. It's Ron James. And thank you for that statement, because I do know Tim Corden, and I know he's about to go on the Northern tour, or the whole statewide tour. And I just got off of a Zoom call with Dave Bluen, who was informing some folks in the Wausau area about the details of the legislation that was passed recently that made this all occur. So, hey, that's why I'm reaching out to you folks. I saw this come on my radar, and we do need a statewide effort on this. There's another issue. There's this thing about the drilling fluids that are in use statewide, and there's this issue about PFAS in these things. So we have a lot of similar things in common. So I appreciate all the kind words about reaching out, and I'd love to work with everybody.
Yeah, I just to follow up on that, I think we need to reach out to more, the usual cast of suspects, Sierra Club and some of these other folks. And I guess I got to say the other thing that's going to be crucial is this election coming up. If the choice people by the state Supreme Court get elected and control everything in our government, I'm really afraid what's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen except more of the same. So I think that's one side of it. I know Steve Watrous is working on a military questionnaire for the U.S. Senate candidates, and I think we need to start thinking about an environmental questionnaire and looking at that kind of thing for the U.S. Senate candidates, and for people running for governor. I know what the Republicans are going to say, but we've got to start putting the heat on them. And I know, like I said, Steve's got a questionnaire going on the military side of this things. Steve Watrous does, and Jim Carpenter. So that's one level of what's going on. But again, this is the other crucial issue. I mean, I can't say, I talked about the West Virginia versus EPA. That's going to be, if this is conservative U.S. court is going to rule as a conservative way, it gets pretty depressing, the whole thing. Doesn't mean we're not going to keep going. Excuse me. I got to stop talking for a minute.
Let me jump in, Tom. Okay. The last midterms, we 350 Milwaukee did a lot of work in questionnaires and surveys to candidates, a lot of work. And what came out of it was some Democrats responded, probably half of them. No Republicans responded, none. And it was kind of a futile effort. It was really disappointing. But that seems to be a trend nationally in terms of politicians kind of holding their position and not getting it out there, But Peace Action nationally had that same experience. People did not respond to surveys anymore. And you were away, Tom, but maybe at an upper level in terms of the governors and the senators. we might get some response that might get them to think. But I hope that they do respond.
Well,
Thank you, Tom.
yeah, and there's some way we've got to, finding out where they're going to be so we can start going to those places. Where, are they just going to be online? Well, we've still got to find a way of going in their face and talking to them, because the both of these areas are just totally in trouble.
Yeah, and I agree, Tom. And then we've done those things, and I think we should defer that to our strategic planning in terms of what our moves are going to be in the future.
Okay, good. We're meeting on Tuesday, and so?
Yeah.
Okay.
Figure that out. Yeah.
Okay.
Is there anyone else with any comments?
I'll make some comments, and let me begin by saying, first of all, I sympathize with the concern with what's happening to the land, but I'm going to play the devil's advocate. And that is, I was just doing a little looking up about the green light, or light green mining, and part of it is to mine minerals needed for a clean energy transition, for renewable energy. And my question when it comes to these discussions is, how are we going to balance, and I mean, this is a conundrum for me as well, how are we going to balance our need to produce renewable energy with the destruction that takes place by getting the materials to build the renewable energy generation?
This is Ron, if I'm still audio. That's a great question. And I come from a primary metals manufacturing background. And what the projects are in northern Wisconsin, they're gold mining projects. And we do not need more gold. What you're seeing on the Greenlight Metals website is what's referred to as greenwashing, where they're justifying digging these sulfuric acid.
That's what I saw.
Right. They're digging, this is a 450-foot deep proposed sulfuric acid mine that has about one paperclip's worth of gold for every 2,000 pounds of sulfuric acid bearing rock. So, they're telling us that, hey, this is needed for this new transition to the clean energy economy. But there's so much gold that's already been excavated in the world that it mostly goes into gold bars and jewelry. So for them to say, oh, you need this for in your cell phone, they're doing this greenwashing concept, and we should not expect that somehow the gold that comes out of Wisconsin is going to end up in our cell phone somehow. Then the other issue that they talk about is copper. Well, everybody who makes anything made out of copper who is a primary melter in the state of Wisconsin or the Midwest uses scrap copper. So we have plenty of copper also in this country. So they're really going after the gold and trying to entice their investors to participate in these type of projects.
Okay, well, there are other things besides the gold. They've got gold, silver, copper, and zinc. And I think that to the extent that they're greenwashing, they're using the zinc to do that, because the zinc is what they're basically purporting to be renewables. But we do have an issue with the difference between what we think we need to save ourselves and what we have to do in order to get to that point of saving ourselves and the way that we live our lives. I know that that's personally for me, that is a big sticking point. The differential between the hypocrisy of the way that I live my life is of concern, and it plays into this whole idea of how we're going to make the changes that are necessary in order to keep the temperatures within livable conditions. So that just something I wanted to throw out there. I see that Pat has her hand up.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that man, I don't know what his name is, who worked at Tesla, has opened a factory, recycling factory. He recycles lithium batteries. And so that's one option. They're using aluminum in the batteries. They're experimenting with all kinds of different metals. But that's something that we're going to have to do, is recycle what we have already, what we've dug out of the ground already. And they're starting to do it. We just need to support those efforts.
Thank
This
you.
is Ron again. That's a great point, and that creates what's called a circular economy, where instead of digging these giant holes which do environmental harm, we can keep using over and over again what's already been dug up. Copper and gold, and first of all, Greenlight Metals owns no property where there's zinc on it, so that they're kind of throwing that in their presentation to get their investors excited. But these minerals can be used over and over again without any loss of performance. So that circular economy creates way more jobs and has less impacts on the environment. So great point.
Tom?
Yeah, two things to add to this too. I don't know how many people, public television over the last 3 weeks has had a series on big profit from big oil. And they talk about how the oil companies were lying through their teeth. And their executives, after they retired, start to admit this. And, you know, it's like the same story. That's one direction. So I don't know if you had a chance to see that. It was on the last 3 Tuesday nights. If you get a chance to try to pick that up, that's worth seeing. The other one that I've been getting is a thing called Exxon News. And it's Exxon, and the word is KNEWS. And it talks about the court cases that are going on against Exxon and some of the other oil companies that are started in 3 states. Now, this other group that you see us, that Linda put up about, that we're meeting at Esterbrook Park on Thursday, we've gotten the Milwaukee County, we're pushing to get Josh Call, the Attorney General, to sue the whatever out of the oil company, the money out of the oil companies, and pay for the damages. And, you know, there's some possibilities of that. So, you know, if people can come to that meeting on Thursday, we've already gotten Milwaukee County Board to call on Josh Call to start this lawsuit. Now, I saw our stuff on state treasurer. I'm not sure what a state treasurer can do. And given the, what else shall I say, the low profile of Wisconsin's state treasurer and the lack of things for them to do, I'm not sure that that's the, how that's going to work. But call, and I'll say this here, I don't know, this group running by Dean Muller, we had a meeting with 3 of Call's assistant AGs last summer. And they knew all about the cases that are going on. They were up to speed on this. And so let's get the damages to Wisconsin from these oil companies into court. And there are what Exxon News does is it's been talking about some of the court cases in one's in Massachusetts, the other one's in Hawaii, and I think there's another one. So there's some really interesting things going on in that arena. And I think we, again, need to connect with, you know, all these people, especially in Wisconsin, need to connect with other groups throughout the state.
Okay.
I'm going
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, it's getting late. Charlie, did you have a quick comment?
Just an observation on recycling. I've been tracking a company in Arizona and Nevada that is working on building a magnetic generator to make electricity. They realize they need a lot of rare earth magnets, and they know that China controls that market. So they're investing in Wyoming, basically, to mine some of those materials. But most of them they plan to get from coal ash. Coal ash has all kinds of rare earth metals in it. And we've got a huge problem with coal ash in this country. So, those coal cars come back empty from the coal plants. So if they could load the coal ash into them, send them back to, Wyoming, where the coal comes from anyway, and then they reprocess that into rare earth magnets to make generators to generate electricity, bang, we've got a pretty good situation there. Way to create renewable energy without a huge environmental impact that's deleterious. In fact, this may help clean up the environment.
Yeah.
That is a great point. And for the gentleman who asked about what does somebody like Sarah Godlewski, what kind of influence does she have? We have a organization called the Board of Commissioners of Public Land. They are about to turn over 6,000 acres that was gifted to Wisconsin from the United States back in 1848 when the state was formed. As soon as that goes over to the U.S. Forest Service, it becomes subject for mineral extraction activities. So that's going to go into our Chewamegon-Nicolet National Forest. And the moment it does, it reverts back to the 1970 Minerals and Mining Act. So all the mining companies have to do is sit back and wait for transactions like this to happen because it increases the pool where they can go out and explore and mine.
Okay, thank you so much. And Ron, I'm really glad you came on the call tonight because it really enlightened us on a lot of this. Thank you.
Nice to participate with very well-informed people.
And it does. All of this really adds up to greed. The greed of these big corporations to make money off of this mining, to the greed of the military industrial complex to make money off of war, the greed of the oil companies to make money off of climate disaster. And we just simply have to put our foot down and say enough is enough. And I think what Greg mentioned about taking a look at how we live our own lives, it does make a difference. And living simply, consuming way less as a culture is going to be so necessary for us to survive in the future, I believe.
And I believe that we have to push our elected politicians who represent us, who make their income off this, and who sit back and don't do what we need to do.
Right. Okay, well, it's time for us to say goodnight. Join us on Fridays at the Chase Bank up in on Silver Spring and Lydell at 12 noon. We will continue to work on the Chase Bank campaign. And we will also be letting you know about the strategy planning session, and anyone could join in on that would like to, in addition to the steering committee. So I think that's going to do it for now, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, George and Julie.
Take care, everyone.
Good presentation.
Thank you very much.
And just to mention, we'll be doing this for Peace Action in a couple of weeks, and then later on, we'll be doing it for the Market University Center for Peacemaking in terms of this presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.